G'day, welcome to Project Brupeg, the story of a sunken fishing trawler converting into a global research and expedition boat. We're just about finished on our anchor room rebuild. We've got our stainless floor back in, the sump's going in today, and we're also starting on the redesign of the chain shelf that we had at the front. We ripped it out so that we can get a better layout going on in that anchor room. So we've gone through with our big sump pipe and we've marked out where I'm going to stick it. So I'm putting it as far back as I can without interfering with any of the metalwork that's underneath that piece of the tread plate floor. So the bulk of it is sort of out onto this piece of tread plate below me, which there's nothing really under it. We've got the beam that goes across here, the folded steel beam goes between that rib there and that one on that side over there. So we just have to try and stick it behind that. I'm not too stressed if I end up going a little bit overlapping on that, because I can always just cut the top of that out without too much issue, so we can just knock that out with a plasma. So we'll go through now, we'll get the plasma out, we'll go and cut that back part out, and then we'll knock this front bit out and see where we're sort of sitting in relation to that sort of cross beam that I spoke about. So I'm back down the bottom of the boat. So this is our sump that we're about to build. Now I need to make a bottom for it, and I don't have any flat stainless that I can use. I can patch together the bit that I just cut out, but it's a bit of a mess. There's going to be a weld right across the middle, and remember this has to basically be able to be pressure tested, so it has to be a decent piece of stainless. Enter this guy. So on the bottom of kegs, these are 316 stainless, food grade. There's a nice, they're pressure rated as well, so obviously there's a nice sort of curved bottom on it. So I'm going to put my piece of stainless on top of that, mark it out, and we're going to use that as the bottom of our sump. In case you're wondering why I don't do the obvious thing of just use the keg as my sump, it's physically too big, the diameter won't fit in the hole, so that's why I have to go with the smaller diameter pipe and just cap it off with a piece of the keg for the bottom. Ever wondered what's inside a beer keg? Not much, but now you know. So I've chucked a couple of tacks on. You can see it doesn't quite line up perfect with the tube, and I'm thinking the tube might be slightly out of round. I've spun it around a few times and I can't really get it to line up, so probably a bit of both. I'll probably cut it small, and it's also a little bit out of round. I also thought I was probably going to be welding it on the inside as well, but now that it's sort of pretty much close, I'm kind of happy with where it is. I'll weld it on both sides, do a double continuous given that this is a pressure vessel. So we'll go through and clean those up, just give them a light flappering, they don't need much, and then we'll give it a weld on the underside. I'm letting it cool down and I'll flip it over and see what we've got to work with on the other side. So now that it's cooled down, we've got the bottom on the sump. So there's a bit of slag around the bottom, doesn't really matter, you're never going to see any of that. What I am interested in is how good the welds were on the inside. So I'm pretty happy with the bottom. Let me see if I can show you that. They sort of come up pretty uniform and so on. That'll definitely do. What I'm going to do now is go through and sandblast the inside of this and do another bead around the inside. I'm going to sandblast it because I want the stainless to be absolutely spotless when I'm welding it, and this needs to have a sandblast anyway. It's grubby and covered in muck and all sorts of stuff. So let's go down now and we'll give this a bit of a clean up, ready to weld. So one of the things with this sandblaster is because of the design of the nozzle, it starts to wear out parts and they kind of have a lifespan on them. This is my old blasting nozzle, and actually this is a good example. This is the one that I made that does round corners, but you can sort of see the design. So sand comes in here and then gets venturied across and up, and pressurized water goes straight down this one here. So the sand has to do this big bend right at the end, and you can see that hole. That's what happens. It's pretty standard that it just wears the things out, and you can see the big lump of braze on the top of that. Every time it blows a hole in it, we have to just go and pile another big lump of braze on. So it's not a very effective or efficient solution. However, I found these guys. So these are quite cheap. They were 45 bucks each. Those other ones, these ones here, they were 150 bucks each when I bought them a couple of years ago, I think it was, tops. These ones I've recently got, and they were 45 bucks each. They're a really nice design inside. They've got like ceramic liners and stuff, so hopefully it'll last a bit longer. But the thing I like about it is the sand gets fed in straight on an angle here and then hits the water jet. So I'm hoping the water itself is that comes straight down this line here. I'm hoping that's gonna break up the sand coming in on the angle. If anything, it's gonna wear that out, but that's really not a big deal. Like what we've done there, you just slide a bit of rubber pipe over the top of the hole. There's a hole in here where it blew on that corner where the sand's basically worn through, and that's lasted probably a good 12 months, and when it doesn't last, we just put another bit of rubber pipe on. So that's an easy fix. Cheap and easy to replace, expensive and hard to replace. So hopefully this design is actually going to last a bit longer with us. Alright, all fitted. Let's go and see how well they actually blast. Give you an idea what we started with. That there is kind of that gross black rubbish. That was what we started with, but it was right the way around. And that there is what the wet sandblaster leaves it like, just that clear, lovely stainless look. So what I'm going to do is go round and blast. It's a bit hard to see in this light, but I'm going to go through and blast the weld right around that bottom on the inside. I'm going to blast the whole thing out just to clean it, but mainly getting into that weld so that I can put another double continuous on top of that. So I'm pretty happy with that. That's going to do for now. It's clean enough for what we need to do anyway. What I'm going to do, as you can sort of see in there, I've been able to basically clean it up enough to be able to weld. I'm going to go through, I'm currently doing a poor man's pressure test on it to sort of see if there is any actual holes in there, because what I'd like is for the second weld just to be a case of filling it up, giving it heaps of extra strength, not necessarily having to fill holes. So I'm going to let it dry out in the sun. It'll dry out on the outside here obviously, and then I'll be able to see if there's any leaks by the dark patches that show up on it. Now it's time to fish my hammer and that piece of steel out of the bottom of the boat. our stuff out of that anchor locker, what I need to do is climb down in the hole, and you can see we've stuck the floor just in there temporarily so that we could sit everything on it, but I've got to rip all of that out now, grind all the way around the edge so that I can weld it, but then I also need to rust kill underneath the floor, so we'll get into that now, seal up all of the rust areas and the bare steel, and then we'll get stuck into welding the stainless floor back in. So now that we've ground away the edges and we've sort of cleaned up where this is going to fit over top of the sump, I need to get in there now and start vacuuming out all of this. So there's a lot of dust and rubbish. You can sort of see it sitting as a coating over everything, that sort of light grey sort of colour everywhere. That has to basically come out, so I'm going to get in there now with the vacuum cleaner and yeah, get all of this junk out of the boat. You can sort of see it down there sitting on top of that cement. Clean up all around here so we can't yeah, get any crap in our welds and that sort of thing. And then once we've got it spotless, we're going to go through and start our rust kill process, so we'll show you what we do for that. Righto, time for a rust kill. So the stuff that I'm about to spray is just a generic brand rust kill. The brand that you use really doesn't matter. The important thing is you have to make sure you've got lots of phosphoric acid in it. So you can see here, basically rusty steel. Squirt of that, and it'll show you how fast the stuff works. So you can see already it's turning it into a sort of a light grey. The whole thing will go that colour, and it'll happen as fast as that as well. So I'm going to put my mask on, and we'll get stuck in, and we'll rust kill this whole area. Right, so it's been on for probably 10 minutes now. You can sort of see the colour it goes. So that was the original steel, that's the original sort of colour, and then that's what you're left with, so comparison there. But it comes up quite nice, so if I zoom right in, you can sort of see you end up with sort of like a little bubbly pattern on top. That can be brushed off later when it dries out, but yeah, for now that's plenty for what we need to do. Some areas of this are going to need two coats, mainly the areas that were original steel where we've just hammer drilled off. We've taken all of the surface rust off, but we haven't sandblasted some of those areas, and it's those areas that are going to need two coats. Where we have sandblasted, one light coat is enough to basically bring this up to a real nice iron phosphorus finish, whereas yeah, the rusty stuff we kind of need to really get in there and give it a couple of good thick coats. Now we are going to probably tip maybe, I don't know, 3 litres of this stuff just into the bottom of this tank, for the sole reason that as it heats up and whatever and the gas starts to spin round, it's going to basically permeate every area of this tank, and so if there is ever any rust that starts to try to form in the future, you're going to have a tank full of rust killed gas, which is, or iron phosphoric acid, which is, you know, what we want for the future. So what the plan is now is we'll get this second layer on, and then we'll start welding in this floor. So the floor's down. As you can see, it fits pretty nice around all the various edges, except for here. You can sort of see right there I've been a little bit generous, I suppose you could say, with the plasma cutter, but we'll fill that up, that's all good. So we'll get in, we'll start welding this around, and then we'll get some pressure under it, make sure that she's all watertight.
Hey, I'm gonna leave, but where to? I never wanna know.
So now that we've got the floor welded in, we're going to go through, finish off the last bits of plasmering that we need to do here before we start getting into the grinder. So we've got to go through and grind up the floor. So let me just spin around. Where we've put the sump in, we need to grind up that edge, make sure it's nice and smooth and all lovely. And then we'll finish off grinding up all of the work we're going to plasma. Now, what are we actually going to plasma? So in this room we've got this shelf behind me here. So this is normally where the chain would sit. It would come straight down this hole. See if we can show you where my hand is there. You can see that hole, the chain would fall straight down there and then land in this shelf. Now the issue that we had previously is this hole was only maybe 6 inches forward of this shelf, and then it would pile up and then start crashing over the back and onto the floor. It didn't work, so what we're going to do is just get rid of the shelf altogether. We're going to let it go straight down onto the floor. Hence we've got the sump so that we can pump out any garbage that comes in with the chain and any water that comes into this room. So the stripping pump arrangement is basically a direct copy out of larger ships and things like that, because the bottom of this anchor room is going to be under the seawater level of this boat now. Right, here we go, ribs. So we've got, each of these ribs is 450 mils apart. So you got the very front of the boat and then it comes back maybe a metre, and that's where the ribs start, and then 450, 450, etc. So this rib here we're going to basically chop out. You can see where they've put in a shelf, and you've got a weld over on the side there where they've joined the actual rib in. So we've just marked out where that rib would naturally sit. We're going to cut along that black line all the way around and then up that side there and get rid of that as well. So the back end of the shelf will come out. Then we're going to work our way through. Under all that sand is actually a piece of shelf. We're going to chop that out as well. I didn't realise that, but it's a piece of bloody 8mm thick steel. The rest of the boat's 6mm. Explains why it's so heavy. Fuck. Vacuum cleaner's just died. I think that's probably me for the day. The vacuum cleaner's died, the plasma cutter's died. I've run out of batteries for all of the different cameras we use, and the lights are about to go flat. I was hoping to get this shelf cut out, but I think that's probably going to be the morning's job. I think we'll probably just nip into Bunnings tonight and get another vacuum cleaner. We're making good progress. We've got our floor welded in, we've got the sump welded in. I need to go around and grind it still. We've got the rust kill. There you go, you can see how lovely and grey it makes those panels. There's a little bit of a layer of dust on them now, but it's still a lovely sort of colour that they come up with. We've got this out, needs a good grind up and a clean. But you can sort of see those ribs are back to where they should be. We're going to start knocking back this shelf. we'll get rid of the old pipe work, the drain and everything, and then we'll start building the new one. But what you can see is that floor underneath. So we're going to have quite a large room in here once we're finished. And what the plan is to basically build a wooden box, essentially hardwood box, that all of the chain and everything is going to fall down into. And it's going to protect the sides. So you can see here we've got, so that rib there is stainless. But you come back here, that rib there is steel. So they put some stainless in to protect it. The hull itself is still steel, so we have to protect the hull from any sort of bash marks and whatever from the chain. You can see that they've got really, really thick paint on the front there. That it looks like corrosion, but it's actually just like really ridiculously thick paint. It's probably close to 5 or 6 mil thick. It's not like a rhino line or anything like that, in case you're wondering. It is a chlorinated rubber, so it's a pretty pretty hardcore paint that they used to use on these things. Don't really use it anymore because epoxies are just generally better. But yeah, slowly getting there. Now that we've cut that back and we've cleaned the sand and junk out of it, come around here, you can sort of see there's quite a bit of rust in this corner here, mostly on the plate. It's not really anything to do with the hull. The hull doesn't seem too bad, but I will bash all of this off, sandblast it, and make sure that we're sweet up in those corners. This one here is pretty bad. This is the one that the water sat down, so you can see this is the original drain. It goes down through there and then out. There's a one-way valve out over the side, but obviously being the lowest point, collected a lot of water and rubbish, and there's rust going along the side of the hull there, so it doesn't initially look too bad, but again, I'm going to bash the crap out of that with my hammer drill just to make sure that there's nothing going on. Now what I will do, just to keep a bit of strength up this front here, is rather than cut this all the way up and back down like so, I'll probably cut it up and do a bit of a big radius up the front here, and then bring it all the way back down the side, 75 mil out. These ribs are all 75 mil, so I'll stick with that sort of measurement. But then yeah, as I say, do the big radius up the front. Probably a good 200 or 300 millimeter radius, maybe 300 mil, something like that. I'm hoping after yesterday, the plasma has had a good think about its actions and decided to come back online. Because if that's the case, it means we've got a plasma to do that chopping of that shelf. If we don't have the plasma, it gets a lot harder. We've got to do it with a grinder, and then cutting the radius takes a lot longer. Plasma, you can just whip it out. But yeah, we'll plug it in, we'll see how we go. It looks like the thermal overload isn't coming on, which is a good sign, so I'm hoping we're going to have that this morning all functional. Last week I told you about Danger Cam 1 and Danger Cam 2. Now this is what happens when you get it wrong. Danger Cam 2 has got weld marks all over the lens. So we've got a new lens that we're fitting in, but we have to strip the whole thing down, little O-rings and everything, little LCD screen that has to go back together. Trying to get this out is proving to be a bit of a nightmare, but apparently you're supposed to be able to grab it and just twist it out. This one's proving a bit hard, so I'm trying to be a bit delicate, so I don't want to break it. So yeah, life on a bloody YouTube boat is pretty much fixing cameras quite often. Alright, now that we've got pens and water, we can push on and get this job finished. So let's climb in, mark out our shape. So what I'm doing, if you can see it in the light, but I've got the bucket off my new vacuum cleaner. Just gonna, right, it's close enough. That's centered. There we go. I can hardly see that. Right, that's my front bow mark. So let's figure out what we're doing down these sides. Pretty much just going to do a straight run. We'll just throw a line down this. Just going to do a straight cut all the way down here. Lovely. Right, let's start hacking that out. So what I've decided to do in here, rather than use the plasma and cut down the sides, I'm not 100% confident my plasma's got the duty cycle to be able to do all of that cut all the way around, so I'm going to use my 5-inch grinder, slice the straights down the sides. Also means I get a nice straight edge and there's very little grinding to do afterwards. And then I'll do the radius alone with the plasma cutter. I did these with the plasma cutter on both sides. I cut these ribs with the plasma cutter, but there was a reason for that, is because the boat has a slight curve in it on the bow. I wanted to follow that all the way down. So all of these ribs have actually been bent and then installed, and I wanted to essentially duplicate that, so hence I wanted to use the plasma on the side particularly. So yeah, and it came up alright. I'm sort of happy with it. Like, there's a few dags on it as you'd expect with plasma, but nothing that can't be flat wheeled off and made to look nice and pretty. So one of the tricks we have to do is go through and actually round off all of the cuts. So anywhere we've ground or plasmid, we have to make all of the edges as sort of a nice radius on them, just a gentle radius, because it helps the paint to stay on much longer. If you've got a sharp edge on steel when you paint it, you end up with a real thin spot on that edge. So if you radius it, it's much easier to get a better coat. Can't really believe how big this room feels now. So now that I've got some working room, what I'm going to do, this is the thing that you saw that was on fire earlier. So it's basically that spray and foam stuff. I don't know why, but they put it there, and I don't really like the fact that it's there, because I can't really get to the steel on either side. So what I'm going to do is actually rip all of that out and then blast it, paint it, and just yeah, essentially keep it clear so that I can make sure we don't get any crap down there. Now we are probably going to have chain and stuff sitting up against that, so I will probably do some sort of wood brace to stop the mud and debris and all that sort of stuff falling forward. Probably just like a really thick plywood. It'll be pretty sacrificial, but it'll be enough to just stop crap going over top of it and down into that slot area. In fact, thinking about it now, that's probably why they did that foam in the first place. There is some rust that we found, so this was the lowest corner, the lowest part of that shelf. So this is where the water basically sat, so you can sort of see up close you got a fair bit of crap and gunk. So I'll go through and basically hammer drill all of that. So I'll get a hammer drill out now. I'll particularly pay attention around these sort of edges, because that's where it's generally worst. That's where your rust is the worst. You can sort of see a couple of little cracks and stuff there, a wee bit hard to see, but there's a wee bit of, see how the paint sort of, actually let me show you. See there, you've got the paint basically bubbling up slightly. They've just piled, you know, bucket loads of paint on, but there is rust underneath it. So it's something where there's been a bit of a problem before, and they've just piled heaps of paint on top to deal with it. That's quite common in commercial boats. It's not uncommon to get an inch of paint on some areas. So all of that stuff I want to rip off and actually start again, make sure that we're dealing with good steel right from the get-go. Now that we've given the rust a bit of a bash, it's nowhere near as bad as I thought. So you can certainly see down in here there's pitting and things like that, but nothing that's going real deep. It's only probably going a mil or so. There's some pretty thick paint on there, so that won't necessarily blast off. If we're going to deal with that, we're going to have to start chipping that off with a big hammer drill. I just saw a bit that I missed right in that corner there. So yeah, under here as well, it didn't look too bad. You can sort of see there's the original weld, and then the pitting and everything hasn't really gone in much, probably only half a mil to a mil. So none of that's really a concern. But what we'll do, and then down there was a wee bit as well that I've bashed off. The little air hammer drill thing has given up the ghost. That's the third one that I've killed in this one job. They just don't last, they're toys. So what the plan is, I'll get my big hammer drill in here, we'll get this paint off, create quite a bit of noise, and then start sandblasting in here. So I've given the room a vacuum out. You can see it's pretty clean now, and the sump has been cleaned out as well. So what I'll do is actually hook the pump up. When I start water blasting and sandblasting in here and things, I'll actually get the pump up and running, and we'll just use the old outlet. Get rid of rip that off, there we go. Just use the old outlet, push the water straight out the side, and it'll keep in here fairly clean while we're working. So this is the freezer room in Brupeg. The Morse cables are going to come through the wall up here, and they're going to head backwards down into the engine bay, which is that bulkhead just behind me there. You can see the door through to the engine bay over there. We're going to be splitting this into 2 separate rooms, and previously we weren't 100% certain that we were going to do that. We thought maybe we'd leave this open and have plenty of bunks in here and that sort of thing. Depending on the missions that we were doing, we could fit more people in if we needed more room for scientists or gear or whatever sort of thing it was. However, we've decided that we are going to split it into 2 rooms, and what that gives us the advantage of, we'll have a wall right down the centre line of the boat. Now we can actually hide the Morse cables inside that. So one of the ideas that Malcolm came up with was bring it through down that kitchen wall, so from the Morse controllers down the kitchen wall through this bulkhead up here, and then a nice big gentle bend, and we can push it straight up and over and into the engine room, quite up fairly high, so that we can keep the engine room clear as well, and the cables will then do a nice big curve down to either the gearbox or the engine, depending on where it's going. We're going to be running 2 separate cables in 2 separate conduits. They're going to be one above each other, so that as we do it's going to be a wooden wall, as we do our wooden beams, we're not going to reduce the strength too much by having them side by side.
Like summer sky, if you're smart could kill or die. And now it starts to rain, so let's enjoy it.